Hi, my name is Pip and this is my review of Lily Allen's My Thoughts Exactly. I listened to this on audiobook because, I like audiobook anyway because I'm an audio learner, and also I really love listening to autobiographies when they're read by the subject of the book. I think that that's really interesting to listen to someone talk about their life, and sometimes for me it can make a mediocre autobiography a little bit better because you kind of get a little bit more of the actual emotion of the moment that they're writing about or talking about through their voice that you wouldn't get if it was somebody else reading it, or you wouldn't necessarily get just reading the book itself in a physical copy. So I really liked this book. I thought it was really, really interesting. It's quite short. It's very much a warts and all style look into Lily's life. She doesn't hold back. She's very, very honest. She doesn't try and make out like it's all rainbows and sunshine. And the thing that I really liked about this is it's not your standard biography or autobiography structure. And she does say that in the beginning, and I thought, yeah, I've heard that before. But it's really not. So I do tend to get a little bit bored by the in-depth look at the childhood of the subject of biographies that usually happens in the beginning of them. I don't always feel like it's really relevant, or I feel like you really could wrap it up a lot faster. That is not the case with this book. So the way this book kind of happens is a little bit more, I want to say, conversational. So it's a little bit like having an extremely honest conversation with a friend where they're saying, this is the thing that happened to me as a kid, and this is why performing at Glastonbury was such a huge moment for me. And she kind of links back to multiple events, multiple times at different points throughout the book. And it's sort of broken up into chapters which are more thematic as opposed to chronological. And I've got to say, I found her talk about relationships, codependency, really very interesting, and I think very important conversations, and she's clearly very self-aware. And I found her conversations about sex really very important. So in my 9-to-5 job, I am a physiotherapist. I do a lot of pelvic floor work. Some of the things that she talked about in her book, My Thoughts Exactly, are conversations that I have with women. So it is very common that people don't want to bring up these things because they're embarrassed or because there's shame associated with it. And I think it's really wonderful that Lily had the balls to put it out there and speak so frankly, and that she's therefore then normalizing some of this conversation and removing some of the stigma. I think it's just so important what she did in this book. I just really think that she deserves to be commended for that. One of the other things I really liked about this book is looking at the beast of fame and the way the persona that people get in public sometimes really has very little or nothing to do with the person you actually are, and how you kind of create that person and then it gets manipulated and compounded on by other aspects, other people, the media, and it then can sometimes become a beast of its own that really you have no control over and no association with, and yet that's your public image. I thought that was really very interesting in the way that impacted her life and some of the choices that she made. I've often thought when you watch a lot of interviews of particular famous people on YouTube, a lot of the time their answers for certain questions are pretty same, no matter how many times they've been asked the question, no matter how many different ways they've been asked the question. And I just think that potentially some of that, when you look at people, is obviously self-preservation. You get burnt in the media enough, like how Lily talks about, and you've got to find a way to preserve yourself and your sanity. And I think that sometimes when you look at celebrities and people who are interviewed a lot, they've obviously made a decision about how much of themselves they're willing to share with the public. and they just give you that part, and then you as the public are making a huge judgment on who that person is based on a teeny tiny little part of their life or the little bit of themselves that they're willing to share. And I just think that's really interesting. And also then when it comes out in Lily's book, how then she talks about, you know, trying to decide what she shares, how honest she should be, how she controls the narrative. And they're there all the time around her, creating stories about her, and often very derogatory stories or stories that are aimed at basically saying, you know, commenting on her body or her mental state or her love life, and just some very harsh judgments of her that I've seen in the media over the years. And also, like, some things, like, they have to have been lucky guesses or so betrayed by inner circle people. Like, how did they find out she was pregnant before she found out she was pregnant? And when certain stories get out, you know that you only told a certain number of people that. So one of those people has been talking and spreading your personal business. And then it makes it really hard to trust people, especially also when that happens with people like your therapist, who you pay for your privacy, and that person is talking about you anyway and violating their duty for patient care. Like, that's a really isolating thing. And it's really very, very interesting the way she brings that up in this book, and her sort of inner dialogue over the years about how much does she share, how honest is she. Well, they already know about this, but they're going to think I'm they're going to think I'm whatever, or it's going to confirm their opinion of me if I announce this, or if I just say, look, I'm a young girl who is having is pregnant with a child that I do not want, and I'm having an abortion, so I'm going to lie about it and say I lost the baby. And I mean, it's just a really fascinating life that she's had, and my word, she has been through some things. Some of the other things I really enjoyed about this book were the way she seems to have quite a lot of insight into herself. She's codependent, she's narcissistic, and things like just how she talks, like really basic things about not wanting to be objectified, finding it disgusting, and in the same breath wanting to be objectified because she feels rejected if no one's objectifying her. Now, anyone who has been aware of Lily in the media is aware that she had a stillborn child, and she talks about George in this book, and the way she speaks about him is brutally honest and heartbreaking. And I mean, Lily has really suffered through some incredible traumas in her young life, and she's very honest with the way she dealt with those traumas, the way that scar tissue affected her going forward, and the way that exacerbated some of the issues that she already had, how that made her self-destructive. This is really a warts and all book, not a cookie cutter, I'm protecting myself, I'm going to give you a little bit more, make you buy the book, but not actually genuinely open up and talk type of biography. It's a really honest account of her life, and a very brave book. The final two things I really liked about this book was, obviously, I liked the alternate structure of the way the autobiography ran, that it wasn't just all childhood at the beginning and then the next middle part of life and then motherhood, and then I found that much more interesting, much more engaging. And that led to the last thing I really enjoyed about that book was that it didn't drag. It never dragged. I was never bored. I mean, it was short and sweet, but it doesn't drag. She bounces from one event to the next event and links it all together beautifully, and one topic to the next topic. And it's interesting and it's fascinating, and she doesn't harp on about, someone's effect on her life for too long. She's very direct and to the point, and that makes it a very interesting read and a very interesting listen. The only real negative about this book, and I'm really struggling to find something negative about this book, was that really as an audiobook, Lily's not the most engaging narrator. But that's fair enough. I mean, this girl has been through some fairly horrendous traumas in her life, and it wouldn't be fun to read about them. So I can totally understand why she doesn't sound super excited to relive those events. I mean, it makes complete sense. And it didn't really affect my enjoyment of her book or my ability to appreciate her story. It was just something I noticed. That simple. So if you really enjoy autobiographies and biographies, I think you'll really enjoy this book, particularly if you enjoy them about people in the music industry. But it is just generally a really interesting autobiography, and I highly recommend that you pick it up or listen to it on Audible. I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, and yeah, definitely check it out because it's well worth a listen or a read. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and to check me out on Instagram and Twitter @PipCoombs.